Good morning, students. Today we are going to discuss the temporal and infratemporal region. So what are the different bones? What are the different boundaries of the temporal fossa? So this is known as a temporal fossa. Now the above it is bounded by the temporal lines of the frontal bone. Below it is bounded by the zygomatic arch posteriorly and infratemporal crest medially. So this is the infratemporal crest of sphenoid, because we know the different bones of this norma lateralis. What is this? This is the greater wing of the sphenoid. This is a temporal bone. This is zygomatic arch, and this is the parietal bone. And from this is a parietal bone, and this is a frontal bone. And from the frontal bone, the temporal lines are coming, and they are going like this. So above it is bounded by these temporal lines of the frontal bone. Below it is bounded by the zygomatic arch. You can see here that is upper margin of the zygomatic arch laterally and infratemporal crest medially. And the anterior wall of this temporal fossa is formed by this is the frontal bone. So that anterior wall is contributed by the frontal bone. Then this is the zygomatic bone. So anterior wall is completed by the frontal bone, zygomatic bone, and the greater wing of the sphenoid. So these three bones form the anterior wall of this temporal region. Now the floor, this is the floor of the temporal fossa. In the floor, we have discussed in our previous lecture that pterion is present. So this is the pterion point where the different sutures they meet. This H shape is suture is the pterion point. So pterion point is between these sutures are just they form the connecting link between the different bones which are present around it. So one suture is connecting the greater wing of sphenoid with the frontal bone. Then another suture is connecting the frontal bone with the parietal bone. Third suture is separating this parietal bone from the greater wing of the sphenoid. And next is the temporal bone from the greater wing of the sphenoid. And if we see the landmark, it is just above you can see the 4 centimeter above the midpoint of the zygomatic arch and about 2.5 centimeter behind this fronto-zygomatic suture. So this is the point which is known as a pterion, which is present in the floor of this. And on the internal side of this pterion, the anterior division of the middle meningeal artery is related. Along with this, the middle meningeal vein is there, and the stem of the lateral sulcus is related with this point. So this is the important bony landmark which just tell us, or which just give a guide to us, that what are the different structure lying deep to it. So this is the temporal region. Now coming to the infratemporal region. So just below this temporal bone, so this is known as the infratemporal region. So this region is known as the infratemporal part. Now this portion is forming the roof now. So this is the roof of the infratemporal region. So what are the different bones which are contributing to the roof? Now if you see, this roof is open on this side. That is between zygomatic arch and this portion, this roof is open laterally, which is communicating with the temporal fossa above. So this is the communication gap. Then medial part of this roof is formed by this is the greater wing of the sphenoid. So sphenoid bone contribute to the roof and the squamous part of the temporal bone. So medially the roof is formed by the greater wing of the sphenoid and the squamous part of the temporal bone. And laterally this roof is an open space which helps in communication of this infratemporal region with the temporal one. So this is the gap present here, which just give a communication between these two fossae. Now coming to the anterior wall, if we see the anterior wall of this infratemporal region, the anterior wall is formed by the maxilla. You can see this is the maxilla and the zygomatic bone. So this zygomatic bone and maxilla is contributing to the anterior wall of the infratemporal region. And in this portion, on the inner side, if you can see, one foramen is present, that is known as the zygomatico-temporal foramen, because it is opening in the temporal region. So this is zygomatico-temporal foramen, which is present in the zygomatic bone, and in norma frontalis we have seen this zygomatico-facial foramen. So on the face it is zygomatico-facial foramen, and in the inner side of this zygomatic bone you can see this zygomatico-temporal foramen. Now the medial wall of this infratemporal region is formed by this lateral pterygoid plate. Lateral pterygoid plate and pyramidal process of the palatine bone. So pyramidal process is the part of the palatine bone. So that bone and the lateral pterygoid bone plate, it forms a medial wall. So laterally, this infratemporal region is just covered by a ramus of the mandible, because head of the mandible, it is going to articulate here. So the ramus of the mandible, it forms a lateral wall of the infratemporal region. So this is all about the infratemporal region. So these two fossae, they are very important, because before understanding the TM joint and temporal and infratemporal region, so you should have the knowledge of the different bones which are forming this. Now, as I have told you, the anterior wall is formed by the maxilla, medial wall is formed by this lateral pterygoid plate. You can see a cleft-like structure over here. So this is known as the pterygomaxillary fissure. So this is the pterygomaxillary fissure, and if we further see the communication of the pterygomaxillary fissure in the upper portion, you can see it is communicating with the orbit. So through the inferior orbital fissure. So this pterygomaxillary fissure is continuing with the inferior orbital fissure in the orbit. So it has communication over here. And this anterior wall of the infratemporal region, that is maxilla and the zygomatic bone, it just separates the infratemporal region from the orbit. And same thing is with the temporal region, that is this frontal bone and the zygomatic bone, it separates the temporal region from the orbit. So these are the important structures which are present in the temporal and infratemporal region. So again, I request you, if you like my videos, kindly share it, like it and subscribe it. Thank you very much. Please don't forget.